This is Van Electric Coast, and we're live on the air with W.T. Hamilton. You're a mindset coach, and you're an author. You're an award-winning author. I want to welcome you to the Family Electric Coast podcast. How are you doing tonight?
I'm doing great and excited to be here.
I want to let people know that we do have your website, https://mindset for successtraining.com. That will be fully clickable. You don't have to remember it. But once we're published on all the platforms, right now we're live on Twitch, Facebook, and YouTube. On those platforms, there will be clickables, and we'll talk more about what goes on if people click that. Want to let people know that we are a featured podcast on the News Network, and you see that little icon up there. And if people use coupon code GHOST, they can check that out for 30 days free. That'll be an audio-only podcast, and you can check it out on Newsly. And one of the questions, well, two questions we ask any guest before we start is what motivates you and why do you do what you do?
So really what motivates me is challenging myself to do things that I shouldn't be able to do on paper. So basically my personal impossibles and really seeing how far can I push the limits of what I can do. So that's what motivates me. And then why I do what I do is because a lot of the insight and the things that I learn how to do, I like to share with people so that they can learn how to do it too.
So what made you want to do that? Just because had you felt like you had limitations and then you decided you didn't want to be restricted by those like glass ceilings?
Yeah. So a lot of it was, I was working in a job that I really loved. And it was back in 2000 and I think it's 2008. And then when that stock market crashed, the 2009 housing, the job came to a halt. And I realized I wasn't in control of my life, my destiny, or even my financial stability. It was all dependent on what other people did and how they managed my opportunities and my money. So that made me wake up and start to say, okay, I got to learn how to take control. But then how do you take control? What are the steps to take control of your life? Yeah, exactly. So that kind of set me on that journey of I got to figure this thing out. And then once I started figuring it out and seeing what was working and what wasn't, people would start to ask me, like, how are you doing this? Because at one point we were all on the same level. And then I'm kind of moving up a little bit and doing things that are more noticeable. And they start asking me how I'm doing it. So that kind of led me to get into writing and just coaching and helping people.
Were you doing the coaching before the writing or like simultaneously?
No, I was doing the writing because I really didn't want to be the guy in front doing things. So kind of like for me, I felt like if I write the book, you read the book, you get what you need out of it, and my job is done. And then I found out that no, that's not how it works. Once you write a book, people want to connect with you. They want you to
push
speak.
it.
Yeah, and I didn't want to speak. I didn't want to go on camera. I didn't want to do any of that stuff. I really want to just hide behind the keyboard, but it doesn't work like that. I found out the hard way.
So that kind of stage fright, I mean, that's a common thing. Like I'm a musician, I'm a producer, podcaster, and before I did this, I'm a keyboardist. So in a band, typically the keyboardist is not up front, so we can kind of hide. We're like in the back, we're setting stuff up, and I don't have to. But what I realize is, like, if I ever want to get anywhere, I'm going to have a voice. I'm going to have to sing my own songs. I'm going to have to get out there and promote my own stuff. And that's always a hard thing, like the catalyst or the point. What really drove you to like, oh, I'm going to have to actually get in front of people and actually talk about this book or have a lecture? And was that a hard, that first time you did it, what was the feeling like?
Yeah, so I had a similar, so when I was teenager and then in my early 20s, I was in a rap reggae band, and I was one of the main performers, but I had the luxury of having the group around me. So that was kind of like my safety zone.
Safety blanket.
But and you're singing a song, so you're not answering questions, you're not teaching people anything. So it was like, here's my song. You can sing along to it. You can
That's it.
get into it. But now doing this other thing, it was like, I got to come up with these concepts, show people these concepts, and then also be ready for criticism and be open to like debate if someone doesn't agree with what I'm saying. And so that
Give
was
and take,
very
back and
fearful
forth.
for me. Yeah. And
Yeah,
then
the back and forth. Like, yeah, that's hard.
yeah. And then also I didn't really know there was an art to speaking. So when people were telling me you got to start doing this stuff, I'm like, no way, man. I don't like speaking in front of small groups, especially. I'm more comfortable in big crowds when you're on stage, but actually small groups where it's a little bit more intimate was more intimidating for me. So that was things where I had to start to figure out, okay, what are the steps that I got to take to be able to be comfortable doing that? Because that was one of my personal impossibles. I seen other people that were doing it, and they were basically the same kind of background as me and education as me, but they were doing this stuff, and there was things that I was fearful to do. So I knew I could do it because other people were doing it, but I didn't know how I could do it.
Did you have to did you go to a coach to get the ability to do it, or was it just by kind of muscle memory of trying it and learning as you do it? Well, what's the story there?
Yeah. So what I did was I started watching YouTube videos and seeing different speakers, and a lot of the speakers had the same theme. They kept saying they were doing Toastmasters. I'm like, Toastmasters? What's Toastmasters? And so I went on Google and I looked it up, and I found out like there was like 6 or 7 clubs in my city. And so I looked at the different schedules, and I found one that was on the schedule that I could go to, and I tried it out. And the first time you go to Toastmasters, everybody's like really warm and welcoming, and they get you to try this thing called table topics, where you go up in front of the room and you pick a paper out of the hat, and whatever that paper says, you got to talk about that for 2 minutes. Yeah. And so I did pretty good with that. I found out later that anybody that's there for the first time, everybody claps for them no matter what they say. So I thought I did really good because I was really good. Yeah. But I started to see, okay, this is not so bad, talking in front. And then because Toastmasters teaches you how to speak and the art of speaking, so I started doing that and studying that. And I did that for about 2 years. And then I started going to speaking clubs, like events, and talking to the different speakers and starting to understand, okay, now how do we get on stage? Now I feel like I've done enough of the training. It's time to get my feet wet and really jump into this. But it was really baby steps. It was just learning a little piece, getting feedback, finding out what you're doing good, what you got to work on, trying to fix those things, and then slowly, gradually getting to the point where I was ready to start jumping on stage.
Now, did you actually start to come up with your lecture or your speech? Because I know there's some people who are very much like flow state. They kind of know what they're going to say, and they don't actually have to have the teleprompter or the paper there. They've kind of muscle memory, like an athlete. They've done it enough times that they have that. But I don't know how much time they were in front of the mirror doing it before they went into the crowd. So how much of that preparation you're doing, or how much is kind of real time, just being able to feel the room and go with the moment?
So because my original background was like rapping and doing reggae rap, it was a lot of freestyle. So I do freestyle, and I have the key points that I want to speak about, but I really do read the room. So if the room is very energetic, I'll do more of an energetic speech. If the room is a little bit more timid, I'll do a little bit of an emotional speech. It just really depends on the feedback I'm getting from the room, and then whether the room can tolerate a lot of jokes or just a few jokes. So I really try to get a feel for what's appropriate for the audience. Yeah. But I find with that,
yeah. Mm-hmm. Go ahead.
Yeah, because when
just
go ahead.
Well, I was just thinking, I'd like to get into jazz. I'm like more of a free form fusion type of thing, and you have a set piece, but it evolves based on how the band feels, how the room feels, what the crowd feels like, and you kind of just what you know, and there's no real bad note because you can evolve the song. If somebody hits a note that's unexpected, you don't stop. You go with that note. Like Herbie Hancock hits a different chord, Miles Davis reacts to that chord and he changes it. And it's like, for people who do freestyle blues, people, a lot of African American musicians, we kind of know this. So like we can kind of read each other, and you know when it works or it doesn't work. And you have that ability to kind of like live correct whatever isn't working. You can just micro correct the whole time to get it done. But it sounds like maybe that's what your freestyling is, all about that.
Yeah, and the nice thing is the audience doesn't know what you plan to say, so they don't know if it's a pre-planned speech or if you're making up. So if you forget to say something, you can kind of come back around. You figure out a way to come back around to that, and the audience doesn't even know that you messed up your speech. But I've seen other people
they get caught up in that.
Because I've seen other people that memorize it, and then they get to a point and they have like a brain fart. They go blank, and then the audience is sitting there waiting, and you feel bad for the person, and
it's very noticeable.
Really trying to figure out what they're supposed to say. Yeah. So
because if you build up your expectations, your self expectations, you can fail and nobody even knew you were failing, right? But you make it apparent because you're not authentic, or you feel like you start feeling like it's okay. This seems forced or this seems awkward, which means you're not comfortable in your own skin. Like if you can get comfortable in your own skin and you can project that confidence, then the whole room's going to feel that. They're going to feel that vibration. They're going to feel that. And so if you come out there, it's like, your animals can kind of sniff when you're scared, and the crowd will know when you're bombing. Comedians know that. And they immediately go from the bad joke to the good joke.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, so it's really a dance. It's a dance, a rhythm. Speaking is an art. I don't think I realized that when I first got into it.
Yeah.
But it really is an art. It's a craft. It's something you gotta fine tune. You gotta be working on all the time.
Well, it's a lot like singing. People forget, like your voice is an instrument. And whether you're singing a song or rapping or, scatting or being a public speaker, like your voice is anybody's voice is very musical. And being a musician, I understand it, right? So I understand like how you project, and like actors know this when they do their theater or they do their performances, how they modulate their voice, how they actually use their hands, how they present themselves. It's like they can get into character. Right? You could have your stage self, you have your normal self. When you go into your stage self, you might exaggerate things or emphasize things that you wouldn't in a normal conversation. But you start to have the same talents that a singer has. They start to understand the power of your voice. And it is an instrument. And once you realize what you're using it for, then you get better at it.
Exactly. And everybody has a unique voice. And that's what, when people are scared to speak, it's like, man, your perspective might be the only perspective in the world that's that perspective. And your voice, the way you say it, might really resonate with someone. But if you don't give that gift to people, they're never going to know what they could have learned from you. So I encourage people now, because I know what it's like to be afraid to do it, but I know how awesome it is once you push past that fear and actually start to master it.
Well, it's your individual vulnerability and authenticity. Like you said, everybody's voice. And as a producer, I deal with musicians, right? And a lot of times musicians, they have stage fright. You might not know it because as soon as they get on stage, it goes away. But up till the point they're on stage, or up to the point when they're in the middle of writing something, they're full of doubt. In some cases, I've run into musicians that are like, wow, this guy's got a lot of issues, but they don't have the confidence. They have the full of the imposter syndrome. But then once you make them understand, like what you're saying, your secret sauce is you, right? Don't try to be somebody else. Like Marvin Gaye was already here. Like if you
Yeah.
try to be him, he was already there. Like you got to show what you have. Now you not
Yeah.
that you weren't inspired by him, and everything you do probably is built by like everything you've ever heard, everything you've ever read, everything that, it's internal, like your waking dreams, your dreams, your subconscious. But how
Yeah.
you use it, even though everybody's heard Marvin Gaye, how you heard it and how you interpret it is actually very unique. It's probably totally different than anybody else in the world.
Yeah.
And once
Yeah.
you start to realize that, it's like, oh, I can still use that. There's nothing wrong with using that my interpretation. Because guess what? Your interpretation is probably not like anybody else's.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. And then when you start to click with that, then you open up the door for all types of opportunities. It's amazing how a little bit of fear can stop you from doing a lot of things that you could do very easily, but for you, it seems like, oh man, that's a monumental task. I'm never gonna be able to do that.
It seems like the impossible is kind of like there's a famous David Bowie quote that I always tend to talk about. Like he said, as an artist, I like to tread water, to actually go into areas where I'm not the best, where
Yeah.
I'm not comfortable. But it involves my art. Like he could just sit there, like he could sit there and just I'm just going to play Ziggy Stardust because that was selling billions of records. But then he was
Yeah.
like, no, I'm going to go change. I'm going to go sing with Luther Vandross. And
Yeah.
Luther sings better than I do,
Mm-hmm.
right? And
Yeah.
I'm going to put myself in a situation and be with a soul singer that sings better than me.
Yeah.
And then he went and put himself in that scenario where, like, wow, I'm nowhere near as good as him. How am I going to do this? But he
Yeah.
put himself in that scenario, and it changed the way he did his music. And he would go from one form to the next, putting himself in situations where he wasn't the best.
Yeah.
But it gave him a learning opportunity and a challenge to push himself. And you can see like the best artists, like the Hendrixes, the Lionel Richies, the Princes, they put themselves in those scenarios.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's how you really test your talents to see how far you can take them, because you don't really know what your true limitations are until you really push yourself to that limit where you're not sure. And I tell people all the time, like, if you take perfection out of your equation, stop trying to be perfect, just do what you can do. You're never going to be as good at it today as you're going to be tomorrow, because every day you're going to be learning something and a little tweak and a better way to do things. But if you don't try and fail, you won't know what works and doesn't work. Or if you just do the safe
Yeah, I mean
way, you
experimentation.
never.
Yeah,
Yeah.
the safe way never has, it has big results because almost everything that's ever worthwhile is like a happy accident. I tell them like
Yeah.
think about like scientists, they what they were going to do, and then their happy accident actually like, well, this is better than what I was planning. And in music,
Yeah.
is the same thing. Like if you talk to a lot of songwriters in the 70s and 60s, it's like they had planned things, but it was like what they accidentally came up with in the studio. Well, that's actually
Mhm.
better than what we wrote down on the bars. That is actually
Yeah.
so we should go with that. But the fear is sometimes, oh, we got to stick to the plan, and
Yeah.
the plan wasn't
Yep.
going anywhere. But it's
Yeah.
actually that kind of in the moment flow state thing that comes out of like, oh wow, is this that came out of nowhere? You have to trust it because it didn't really come
Yeah.
out of nowhere.
No.
Like there's a lot of ability that was there. You just didn't understand the fact that you can channel
Yeah.
your
Yeah.
success. Like
Exactly.
if you get trust yourself and you trust it, like what comes out of your hands and what comes out of your mouth, you
Yeah.
know, then you
Yeah.
start to like not be so full of doubt. And you say, yeah, that actually is a good idea. But if you don't speak it out, like then you never get to evolve it.
Yeah. Exactly. And part of it too is when you have that idea and you put some inspired action to it, it might not become what you thought, like you were saying, but it starts to connect you with people and places and events that are going to open up to, say, your big goal. Like if my big goal at one time was to become award-winning writer. I didn't start out as an award-winning writer, not even close.
Yeah.
So there was processes and things that I had to do that some of the stuff had nothing to do with writing. It was, I ended up having to start speaking and learning how to speak to support the writing part of it. But full circle, that helped me to really, fine tune my writing craft as well as my speaking craft. And so later on, it came back to where I was able to write a book that could win an award. But if I hadn't done the journey of speaking, it probably wouldn't have happened.
Yeah, I mean, it's like life experience. It's like if you don't take the challenge and put yourself, in a deeper end, right, where you got to go out and make the connections, and so you push yourself to your, like, that's not like phoning it in. Like you could just sit and phone it in, do the typical thing, but that's just going to be the same thing every day, right? And maybe, but if you go and you push, well, you might make a misstep or a perceived misstep or make that mistake, but it's not really a mistake. If you think about it, it's like it's a step on the ladder to where you want to go. Yeah. And by the time you get to the top, it's like you're not on the top until you go through every rung. And so, sometimes you usually start at the bottom of the ladder. Yeah. That's just what's going to happen. Some people they think they just jump to the top. Things like, whoa, is this amazing? It just happened like overnight. Usually there's no overnight sensation. Usually there's a lot of steps, a lot of things that were done. You just didn't see it. And you perceive that person was overnight, but it wasn't.
Yeah. And then you have the rare time where somebody, like, everything just lined up and they did get that instant success. But as soon as that success is done, they don't know how to repeat it because they didn't go through the steps to actually build it. So they don't know how it happened. They kind of got lucky and then just one hit wonder, and you never get back there again.
Yeah, so, in music, we have a lot of one-hit wonders. It's rare that you get the guy that gets 10 hits or 20 hits or multiple records. The more common thing is like one of them worked, and that's it. Yeah. And so it's the people who are willing to kind of shift and change expectations. You think about like Miles Davis. I always talk about, like, King of Bebop, kind of invented the form. Is known, almost every jazz person thinks that his style is jazz. And then he went into fusion is the next thing. And then all the traditional people were like, oh, that's not jazz. But, they still like, kind of blues. Like, they don't want to have anything to do with the fusion. Even to this day in the schools, it's like, oh, bebop is the real thing. It's like, and he was already out of that. He was going toward other things. And that's kind of where you go. He's like, when you really want to inspire, sometimes your base won't go with you. You'll actually have law of attraction. You'll pull another group. And just because those people go with you doesn't mean it's not the right thing to do.
Yeah, exactly. And a lot of times you get prompts. So there's things that will happen that'll kind of tell you, hey, you need to start going in this direction. And if you learn how to read those and accept those, it'll help you to make the right choices to make the next steps. Because it's like when you have this idea and you want to do something big, you have to find the steps and find the flow. And sometimes the thing you want to do, maybe it's not the time this year, but there's preparation. There's like a divine preparation. And if you start doing all those divine preparations and then the timing aligns at some point, and then you're ready to go.
Yeah, sometimes the alignment, like, you might be ready, but the world's not ready. So you can approach, and you could be in that spot and you could be really kicking. And I give examples, a guy like Sun Ra, in jazz, today people consider him to be in the same kind of ranks as Miles Davis and stuff. But at the time he was doing, he's dressed up like space aliens and all this stuff. What's that? And people didn't know what to do with it. But now today, he's like in the top Cannon pillar. He's a pillar. But in the time he was doing it, it was like people were like, "What's that?" Because sometimes you can be a little out of time, but it doesn't mean you shouldn't do it. Because over time, he's in the canon. Now people say, "Well, that's one of the best jazz groups ever." So sometimes you have to you might not be where you want to be in the time continuum, but the time continuum goes beyond your moment.
Yeah, it does. Like I talk about that in my book, Extra-Time Actuality, and I talk about we all have our individual realities, and then there's a shared reality, and linear time kind of it's what synchronizes all these individual realities to work in a shared reality. So sometimes things like this, I decided I wanted to get on podcast shows. Your podcast show already had to exist. You had to be looking for a guest. You didn't know you were looking for me, but I found you. I didn't know I was looking for you. And then we connected, and now we're sharing this experience because I had an idea and you had a need. We didn't know about each other at the time, but that's how I tell people how things will work. It's like and the only reason that I got the email where I found, okay, here's this show. So that's kind of how we connected, right? And it's like, if I don't open up to that, you're blocking it from happening. But as soon as you decide, okay, this is what I want to do, things will start to line up for you. And you don't need to know how they're going to line up. It's just, I decided I want to start doing podcasts to promote books and to promote what I'm doing. And then it was like a tap turned on. All these opportunities started popping up for me.
Yeah, because the podcast world's interesting. Like I've been podcasting since like 2016, and my story was like I'm a musician. I'm on SoundCloud. I had a following. Yeah. This guy out of New York named Rock Tunes, he found me, and he said, "I have a podcast. I want to talk to you about your catalog." I said, "Okay, but what's that?" I didn't know what it was. He's like, "Is that like a radio interview?" So I get on it. We like each other on the first episode, and we said, "Hey, we're talking about music. Let's do a show together." In 2016, we did one together for like 6 months, and then he couldn't do it anymore. And I said, "You know what? I wasn't even planning on doing this. I'm a musician. I'm a producer, right? Why would I do a podcast?" But I liked it so much, I started looking to find a way to continue it. So I said, "You know what? I'm going to continue it and go do what he did. I'm going to go find other bands. I'm going to find artists and talk to them." And I went on Instagram. I sent out a pitch on my Instagram. Independent artists, emerging artists. Do you want to have a behind the music like chat and just talk about your work? And lo and behold, I started getting 4 people a month from all over the world. And then it went up, and then I got more attention, and it just sagged from being just on a phone to being on on different platforms, and now it wasn't video, and then it became video. It just kept on evolving. It wasn't even anything I was planning on doing, but when I saw the opportunity, it fit where I thought. I said, "Hey, this could have some good alignment for my brand." It just puts my name out there, puts me out there more often, so then people check out my stuff. So then there's like, wow, then that became a thing when it wasn't even a thing.
It's amazing how that works, huh?
Yeah, there's like the law of attraction. You get pulled toward the positive things that can affect your life if you're willing to entertain it. And I didn't know what it was, and I said, "Well, let me check it out." So your kind of childlike curiosity, as adults, sometimes we lose it. When you're a kid, you'll jump on the bike and you're gonna fall down and skin your knee. You jump on a skateboard, and it's like you probably know you're probably gonna get hurt, but you don't care. You still do it. So like, why not? But as you get older, it's like, "Oh, I don't want to do that. I might get hurt." So it's like as you get older, you have to kind of find that kid that would jump on the bike and not care that you're going to skin your knee until you figure out how to do it.
Yeah, exactly. And now when we get older, we're scared that other people are going to see us and laugh.
Yeah. As a kid, I wasn't even thinking about my friends laughing about me crashing. I just I want to do that bike. And now it's like today it'd be like, well, I can't do that because my friends will find me. My boss will
Yeah.
see me falling down. All these people will see me, so I can't do it.
Yeah. Exactly.
So you kind of have to find that kid, find that 9-year-old kid. He said, I don't
Yeah.
care. I'm just going to do it until I get it.
Yeah. Exactly. I think that's where we struggle a lot. I find with a lot of people that I deal with, it's worrying about what other people are going to think. Like if you really want to do something and it resonates with you and you have that inspired action to do it, you shouldn't really care about what other people think. You should just do that because that's something that you've been prompted to do. I always say you get prompted to do things, and it's up to you to decide whether you actually want to follow that prompt or not. But if you let these imaginary stresses and imaginary fears stop you from doing it, you're going to look back and you're going to say, well, I prayed or I asked to be able to have a solution to this problem, and then I realized this thing came along, but I didn't take it, and that was the answer to my prayer. That was my solution. So sometimes when you have these opportunities, you got to realize like this is a solution that you asked for with the law of attraction, right? You asked for this at some point, and now it's here. You got to recognize it and jump on it.
But I think a lot of times I see people that want to give up, because of social media gives you all these things, right? So if you see social media and you don't get any likes on your post and you don't get any views, then you're like, well, that's not resonating. That's not going to get me anywhere. But if you take a strategy like, what if I just show up and keep on showing up and perfecting and organically build a base instead of trying to fly by night, get 1,000 views, 10,000 views, 100,000 views. Well, that thing that gets the million views could be the cat video with the same 30-second song that everybody else has.
Yeah.
What value does that really have? Versus I've heard stories of, bands that, had a video, maybe 100 views, but a record producer heard it or saw it and then called them.
Yeah.
So just because you numerically don't have a big number, you're forgetting, like, you might reach somebody.
Exactly.
You could reach somebody around the world. You could reach the right person and then suddenly get an opportunity that doesn't reflect the numbers, doesn't reflect the metrics. Because somebody sees something and suddenly they contact you and say, hey, I did what you're doing. I want to get with you. And then suddenly you're working on something like you never thought you would be doing because you're willing to take it out of your head and put it out in the world.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And I've had that feedback too, where, I was posting a lot of like motivational video stuff, like me saying motivational stuff, and I took a break from it. And then somebody reached out to me and said, hey, you haven't posted any motivational stuff for a while. I didn't realize anybody was really watching because the amount of people that were engaging with it wasn't very much. So I thought, okay, nobody really cares. I can take a break for a bit. So now I'm conscious of that. And I try to put certain amount of content out that I think people might be looking for, even if they don't like it or they don't comment. There seem to be more people are looking at it than I realize. But it's
there's more impressions.
What you're talking about.
Yeah. But a lot of times the algorithms like mask who's really actually, it's actually getting more views, but they're not really showing you. It's actually reaching. It's in terms of, you can get impressions where your impression numbers could be crazy.
Yeah.
And then your views are like, well, what's that mean? It's like, so somehow it's getting to a certain group of people. Yeah. And it's like they're playing with the numbers, and it's like it's all, the algorithms are in the interest of the big companies of what they want to do and what they want to push. But you got to know if you want to show up and be authentic and be vulnerable and be your true self, you never know who you're going to reach. And it's kind of like if you're an artist that you got all these paintings in a loft, and you're like, I'm not ready, so I'm never going to put them in the gallery. Your best friend comes up and looks at your room and says, like, these should be in the gallery. Well, I'm not ready. It's like, well, how do you know that? A lot of times artists aren't the best judge of their work. A lot of times artists are not good judges of their work at all. So it's like when people find out, it's like, well, you should have put that out. It's like, well, I didn't have the confidence to put that out. Well, you need to put it out.
Yeah. And it is scary because, like, when you write a book, the first thing you have to do once the book is done and is published, as an independent publisher, you have to get it to book clubs that have reviewers and ask people
beta
you don't
readers
know
and stuff.
to read the book and give an honest review. And once that review's out there, you can't delete it because you're not in control of it. It's there. Yeah, it's there. So I understand in that sense that people are scared with writing. They want it to be perfect. But I tell them, like, you're never going to write the perfect book. You're never going to do the perfect song or the perfect album. Maybe you might do the perfect song, a whole album. But the thing is, you put it out there because there's so many people that are going to resonate with it. And the criticism, like, that's how I learned how to get better at writing. Boy, the first books I did, the criticism, I looked at it as constructive criticism. And it was like, oh, you guys are actually telling me how to write a better book for next time. All I got to do is take the things that you told me with the things that you liked, and the book is obviously going to be better the next time. And so I just kept rinse and repeat. And every time I put out a book, it was better than the last one I put out.
Yeah, it's kind of like, that refined. I mean, if you think about it, like, guys trying to get that 3-point shot, he probably did it like 1,000 times, 5,000 times. Muscle memory, just like a bass player, to be able to play that and not look at it, it's because of all those hours of practice.
Yeah.
And then it gets to the point where it's like, it's just innate. But not only is it innate, but you then can play with it, which means that's where the thing evolves. Like you're saying, the writing, you get better. So that by the 5th book, the 10th book, you're at this point where this like the first time you pick up that bass, you weren't flowing like the way you do 1,000 times after. You've been playing that line. That line starts to change. It starts to get dynamics. It starts to get heart and soul and feeling. That's why people dig it, because like this guy's like radiating this vibe. And you don't get that vibe on the first time. Anything. You have to do it a number of times before you actually get to it.
Yeah, exactly. And then once you've kind of mastered the craft, then you start to get that super creativity where you're like, okay, now where do I take this? I can take this craft to this direction, that direction. That's where
another level.
That's where the super creativity really starts to kick in.
Yeah, that's when if you can be in that flow state and you got all your talking points, you got your elevator pitch, you got your outline, but you trust yourself and you don't have to have all that on the teleprompter and all that on the paper. You start to know, and when you see these, these public speakers at the TED Talks and stuff, they might have their tools, but they know what they're talking about because it's like their life. It's embedded. And so it's not like it's memory. It's like they're able to tell that story because that story is their story.
Yeah.
And so they know how to weave it and adjust it for whatever crowd is there.
Yeah.
And for whatever point they want to make that night, it becomes that thing. And it's like, it really is trusting yourself.
Yeah, it is. And that's a hurdle. Once you get past that hurdle of trusting yourself, then it flows. But that's something where you have to make the mistakes to build up that trust and understand that you can bounce back. Like I had a bunch of speeches that I had done and they went really well. And then I had a night where it was just off. I don't know why, but it just wasn't working. And I wasn't engaging with the crowd. And the words weren't just landing. Yeah, I had a bad, and I went home and I'm just shaking. I had a 2-hour drive to get home and I'm shaking my head, trying to figure out like what happened? Like how did that go so off the rails from all the other, and I couldn't figure it out. But about 2 weeks later, I had to speak again and do basically the same speech, and it just landed. It was excellent, and so I just understood. Okay, you just had an off night. It's no, you're human. It's not a big deal. And
sometimes there's factors beyond. But sometimes there's. I mean, there could be factors beyond your control. It's like the vibe of that night could be like dissonant. So dissonant means like no matter what you try to do, it's going to go a little off the rails. Right? Like I've been, if everybody's been in a band, like you could have a night where you're hitting on all 8 cylinders. Everybody's kicking it totally right. But if the crowd's pissed off or the drummer didn't have a good night where a bass player is like not feeling it, and suddenly it's not going to work. It's like the unit, something's messed up in the unit, and it could be the environment. There could be, there's examples like when Hendrix was playing in Germany one time, and the crowd wasn't really into him, and he was doing his best, but the crowd really wasn't vibing. And this is one of the best guitar. This is the best guitar player in the world.
Yeah.
And that crowd wasn't vibing. It wasn't like Woodstock. It wasn't like other places where the crowd was like totally. They didn't really dig him as much, and it's like he was like struggling. It was like, and then he got into his own little zone. And he's like, okay, I'm just going to be in my zone, just do it. And he did it, but the crowd still wasn't in sync. So it seems like a really off performance. And I'm like, wow, that's a guy like that had a night like that.
Yeah.
And so it's like it can happen to everybody.
Exactly. And that's why when you don't shoot for perfection, you just shoot for the experience and being authentic in what you're doing, you're allowing yourself to have those off nights, and they don't eat you up. But when you're like a perfectionist, that might stop you from stepping back on stage again for months.
Yeah. Perfection's like the enemy of really like creativity. I always tell people like, can I run into somebody and they're like doing like 100 takes, and I say, I sit you down. It's like the third and fourth take of this song are the best take of the whole thing. You're destroying the song with every additional take. Like you're further away from what your initial idea of the song was, and you're not trusting yourself, and you keep on changing all this stuff, and it's not any better. It's actually getting worse. And so it's like you sometimes it's like, well, the mic wasn't good on this, or I heard this. It's like, you know what? Sometimes to have those imperfections, but the vulnerability in the song is really there on the third take, right? And you want to try to fix it, and you're wrecking it. And it used to be back in the 70s and stuff, people would just let it go. But now the problem is the computers can make you go in and ruin it, because they'll let you go in and change everything to a point where you can do it, and it doesn't take as much work, but then you wreck it. And so people are like wrecking music because they're not trusting themselves, and they're not going with their gut. They say, well, I could go in and I can fix it. I can make it right. It's like, you don't do that.
When we used to record, and we would go to the big studios, but we're on a budget. So we only had, a couple of hours of studio time. So 3-4 takes is all we could afford, because we were trying to like record 3 songs in 1 2-hour session. So with that, you're forced, just by budget wise, you're forced to just get the best that you can and take a few takes. And back then we didn't have the all the computer technology. That was in the late 80s, early 90s. So we
the DAWs
we're pretty limited.
The DAWs the DAWs are cool, and they give you a lot of capability, but you gotta be careful. Just like AI and all these new tools, like you can go too far, and then you end up having something that sounds pristine, but it's lacking, I think, the spark. It's lacking the heart. It's lacking the soul. That I'd rather go listen to a James Brown song that has errors in it, that has mistakes in it, right? But it's James Brown. Right? It's the bees. It's like, I don't care. That's the real thing. It's like, whatever you're doing, that's not it.
And when you like the young people, when they hear the older music, they love it because it's more authentic. So even if they like so my kids, they like the
it's got timing.
They like the new stuff, right?
Error. I mean, the new stuff. I mean, it's like the new stuff. It can be so antiseptic, and so many people using the same loops, same drums, same patches, same pads, same soft things. And it's like, okay, you guys just trying to use the same formula to hit the same algorithm on Spotify. Okay.
Yeah.
And I understand what you're doing because you want to get a hit, but it's not creating a lot of innovation. You know,
Yeah.
you go listen to the top 20 in 1974 or 1976 or 1968 or 1954. Look at the songs on those lists and then look at the songs today.
Yeah.
Are you going to match any of those previous decades with the stuff you're putting out now?
Yeah, exactly.
Probably not.
Yeah.
There wasn't all that tech. There wasn't all that tech.
No.
It was kind of like it was you in the band and the producer, and you're doing the work as a human artist without as many
Yeah.
machines, you know,
Yeah.
and doing it more like feeling it. And you know,
Yeah.
that human feel is going to be the thing that keeps us from getting replaced by AI.
Yeah.
Because they want to say they can make the movies and the TV and the music with AI, but AI just takes what it was before,
Yeah.
and tweaks it,
Yeah.
but doesn't really change it. It just takes what was before. Like the human is always going to make what's next.
Yeah, exactly. Because I don't know if AI has learned how to use creativity. I don't know if it ever will be able to be creative the way that we are.
It
We can
seems
tap
like
into
it
this
is because it
imagination.
creates something.
Yeah.
Yeah, it will create something. It will take a picture, but it's taking pictures that artist already drew and then tweaking it and adding something into it. So it seems
Yeah.
like it's brand new, but it's all stuff that already existed.
Yeah.
And the thing is with music is like a blues man can take a song like Going to the Crossroads, and maybe tons of people have talked about going to the crossroads, but how that artist talked about it in that particular moment is uniquely like who they are.
Yeah.
And you know, I don't think AI is ever going to come up with the BB King line or the Lead Belly line or Robert,
Yeah.
Albert King. They're not going to be able to do it like that. They're not going to have that Albert King style, which was uniquely his style.
Yeah.
They can maybe make him, just totally repeat Albert King, but not be Albert King.
Yeah. Yeah. Because like in my book, I talk about like we're the only species on the planet that can use our imagination to create things. There's no other species on the planet that can create music or can create buildings, create cars. So we're tapping into something that doesn't exist anywhere else. We're able to draw these ideas from somewhere and then create them into something tangible in in our 3D reality. I don't think that AI will ever be able to do that.
So it will just replicate what human beings have already done. And then
Yeah.
the problem with that, the danger in that, is you get so much repetition, right? You get architectural design that's been done before instead of design that's never been done before. You get songs that basically have the same structure because that's what it knew, so that's what it thinks the song is. So that's the song. And if people think that that's what the blues song's supposed to be, or that's what the funk song's supposed to be, then that will be what it is. And then no one will ever try to change it. And that's the danger, is like if you just take it and don't take that individuality, the vulnerability of a unique individual.
Yeah.
The fact that like George Clinton and Funkadelic,
Yeah.
AI is never going to create Parliament Funkadelic level stuff ever.
Yeah. No, never.
Ever.
Yeah.
It's not going to have that humor. It's not going to have the humor. It's not going to have the aesthetic. It's not going to have the language or understand how to put those things together because it's not logical. It's it's artistry.
Yeah.
And it's like what he put together with those guys. I don't see AI ever coming up with that.
No, that's pure creativity. And that's the thing that if we harness it, you'll have it for your whole life, and every generation will have it. But you have to constantly use your creativity. You know, to use your imagination and, you know, challenge yourself to think differently and to look into things, change your perspective, look into things and say to yourself, like, how can I do this in a more cool way, in a more awesome way, and in a unique way that nobody else has done before. And that's one of your, you know, the big challenges that.
Yeah, you got to believe you have the right to do it, because some people, they feel like, well, I'm not George Clinton, I'm not Bootsy, so I can't even touch a bass because I'm not Bootsy. It's like, that's the wrong way to think. Like, of course you're not Bootsy, but that doesn't mean you shouldn't pick up the bass. If you think you have something to say with the bass, you should. That doesn't mean you shouldn't pick up the mic if you're not Chuck D, right? Chuck D can say whatever, unbelievable, like love him. But you could say something too if you choose to. That doesn't mean you can't pick up the mic. So that's the thing, is like, when you've got to understand that anybody can become like a self-fulfilling prophecy. They can actualize if they start to look in the mirror and they realize that they're not. Oh, I'm not enough. It's like, it's like, you are you. So you're always going to be more than enough.
Exactly.
That's what you have to have, that kind of feeling.
Yeah, and you got to realize too, like,
it's a hard place to be if you don't believe it.
But like, George Clinton wasn't George Clinton until he decided to be George Clinton, right? And he didn't have anything to imitate, so he did something, took it, maybe what James Brown was doing, but he took it in a whole different direction. So it's like,
he was in the barbershop doing hair. He was in the barbershop doing hair, and then, just like at barbershop, they had these guys doing doo-wop in the barbershop, and he was doing that. And then they started saying, well, we can do more than this doo-wop. They were kind of doing like Four Tops type of like a cappella stuff. And then they realized, like, oh, why don't we bring some guys that can play? Not just the singers, but bring guys who actually play guitars and stuff. And it started evolving, because saying, like, it's not just, just for parties to go singing, as they start taking it serious. And so sometimes you can take your hobby or your passion, and it suddenly becomes your life. And some people will say, "Oh, you can't do that because I can't pay the bills." And that's like the impossible, right? It's like the creative people always go toward that kind of impossible, where people say, "Wait, no, that's not the 9 to 5. That you can't trust that."
And it kind of draws you. Once you're when you align with it, it pulls you. Even if you're trying to push it away, it still pulls you. It's like, you have to do this. Your perspective, your voice, whatever it is that you bring, has to be brought. And when you're in that zone, it doesn't matter what you're planning to do. You're going to end up doing what your talent is begging you to do. Even if it takes longer, you're going to end up doing it, because it just won't leave you alone. It keeps gnawing at you and bothering you and asking you, when are you going to do this? When are you going to take this step and make this thing happen?
Yeah, because a lot of the passions, I think when we had the pandemic, a lot of people, the great resignation was people started saying, I am going to do what I was dreaming about. I am going to go start my own business. I am going to go, start a podcast and start a business, go and do something for myself, something I was dreaming about. And then they had the time to kind of sit down and not be stuck on the commute, not stuck in the plane, not stuck in a bus, and actually think about, what happens if I actually do what I want? Instead of doing what I think I have to do for my responsibilities, it's like, that's like the big mover.
And I was talking to somebody about that a little while ago, and one of the things with the pandemic too is you start to realize, like, you have more money than you need. You just, when you were in that big hustle, you were spending it so fast. But once you had to slow down and you couldn't actually spend the money just wherever you wanted, like, oh, this is starting to pile up. I can actually live off a little bit less than what I thought. and be more creative in what I want to do. So it offered a
Yeah, if you're not
pathway to freedom.
paying for all those things to be out there, you know,
Yeah,
you got to go to work every day. You're buying lunch, you're buying your
yeah,
suits, you're buying your ties. You have to go do this and do that. You're buying all these like whatever, and you just get caught up in the rat race of all
yeah,
the things that go with it. Then if you
yeah,
actually, what if I invest in my idea instead of
yeah,
investing in somebody else's idea? Which a lot of times that
yeah,
you're working in that corporation, you're investing what the CEO and the CFO want. You're
yeah,
putting all your
exactly.
energy, 60 hours, 70 hours into what their bottom line is so they can go in their yacht and travel the
Yeah,
world, but you're like stuck there doing the 70-hour work week.
yeah,
What if you flip the game and say, well, I want to have that goal? This is my business plan, not his
yeah,
business plan, not the board's business plan.
yeah. Yeah, I remember there was a while back, there was I don't know if it was a meme, there was a thing going around that said, if you don't start building your dreams, I'm going to hire you to build mine.
Yeah, that's what they
Yeah,
do.
yeah,
You got everybody working for their. It's like what? Yeah, I can buy my second mansion and my second Ferrari, and
yeah,
you're like, it's like I can barely keep my little Nissan on the road. It's like yeah,
yeah,
like it's like that. Yeah, I don't think so. Not that Nissans are bad. I mean, you could have a GTR,
yeah,
but but I just think it's interesting. What the world offers people is like you can live in a glass ceiling or you can kind of bust
yeah,
through it.
yeah,
And a lot of times it's like you're the one that's actually stopping you most of
yeah,
the time.
yeah. And when you look at the CEO or the big president of the company, they took initiative to make that happen for them. And the people that don't want to take initiative,
Mhm.
that's where you get stuck. So they're showing you like the somebody started that business, even to hire the CEO. Somebody started that business. It started off as an idea, as a risk, not sure if it was going to work or not. Or maybe they had to find their own market niche, but they did it and they built it up to the point where they could hire you. So then you got to realize, well, if you have an idea, you might be able to do the same thing, maybe at a smaller scale, maybe at a bigger scale, but you won't know until you try it, and you take that chance, and you bet on yourself, and you believe in yourself, and you have that really focused vision of what you want to do, and then you stick to it even when it gets hard. You stick to it, and you find ways to keep it going, keep it alive.
Yeah, I think just perseverance and showing up. What I would say to people is like, we're on episode 1,111.
Wow.
Now, most podcasts actually fail after about 6 to 12 episodes. But my rule of thumb was like, what if I just keep on doing it because I like it,
Yeah.
regardless of what anybody says or whatever the numbers say, just keep on showing up.
Yeah.
And by showing up, I end up being in the top 2.5% of podcasts,
Wow.
just because I show up all the time. And
Yeah.
over the years, I'm about 45,000 total listens. From
Wow.
somebody like I never thought I could get that many total listens. And so you
Yeah.
you don't know what you can do until you try it. And then
Yeah.
regardless of the ups and downs, if you just kind of like my grandfather was a coal miner, and every day he went into the mine. That's a
Mm.
hard thing to do when
Yeah.
there's mine explosions and cave-ins. He had to feed 9 kids, and every day he showed up.
Yeah.
And it wasn't the most glamorous job in the world, but that was the job, and he did
Yeah.
it, and
Hmm.
raised 9 kids,
Yeah.
and that kind of like perseverance or understanding the value of actually doing the hard work
Yeah.
had benefits for all those 9 kids. They ended up becoming other things. My mom, brought me into the world, and
Yeah.
my uncle, had his family, and everybody kind of went on, and because he persevered and showed up every day. And so if you show
Yeah.
up every day, you can get value down the line.
Yeah. And you get the blessings. the blessings come to you from putting in the work and, showing up like you're saying, and really just making it happen. The blessings come back to you. Maybe sometimes they don't even come back to you in the way you were expecting. They come from another direction, and you realize, wow, this is because of what I did. I was able to create this or draw this, attract this to me. That's an amazing feeling.
So if people go to your mindset success for successtraining.com, what do they find there?
So we have a lot of free training on there right now, and there are some books that you can download for free that will help you with setting goals, achieving your goals, and really staying focused on using the mindset for success to be able to achieve the things that you want and create a better life for yourself. So I always say, like, it's to help you move in the direction of your dreams.
That's awesome. So we do encourage people to click on that. That will be fully clickable. Facebook, YouTube, Twitch, Apple Podcast, Spotify, iHeartRadio, all the places that we can be listened to or watched. And I want to thank you for being a guest on the program. We always end up going an hour. We don't realize how fast the hour comes up on us, but we hit the hour mark, and it was a great conversation. I do want to encourage people to check out your website, check out your books, check out your courses, and we do encourage people to do that by just clicking through. And I want to thank you for being a guest on the Family Electric Coach podcast.
Yeah, and I want to thank you for having me. I really enjoyed the conversation. It was a great flow. Really had fun.
Thank you. Have a great night.
You too. Thank you.